This is FPV. As you may know, I have a huge passion for flying FPV drones and I'm ready to take it to the next level. I've been flying stabilised DJI drones for 5 years now and would consider myself as an experienced drone pilot. Well, most of the time I guess. To be honest, I've always been a fan of FPV. I just love the speed, agility and tight gaps, as I think it just looks epic. And so I've recently decided to give it a try. One day I was scrolling through YouTube, none other than yourself, and I came across this term called FPV. Then after that I dug a bit deeper and found out that it's just a drone. Well, a drone capable of taking epic FPV shots. And so I thought to myself, well, why don't I get into this? And I had prior knowledge of how to fly RC planes, as you can see behind me. And so I thought this process would be easy for me, but in the end, it wasn't that easy as I thought it would be. And here's how it went. To start off, my plan was to do a few hours a day on an FPV sim. I would do this for around a week and I'd be training on the DJI simulator. That is a free mobile app. Now, FPV simulators, let's just say they can be very frustrating. But nonetheless, in a week, I got the hang of it and I started to manage to keep the drone up. Now this time it takes to practice may vary from person to person, but generally I would say it takes around a week and a half to fully learn how to keep a drone in the air with around 2 hours of flying every day. With this goal in mind, after a few days I was able to complete a few tricks, freestyle that is, and managed to get some good race time through different courses on the simulator. In the end, I really found this process fun, and seeing how far I came with my skills was really rewarding as I could now apply them in real life. Now, before we move on to real life, there's one more thing that I want to talk about, and that's the equipment that I used. Now, I'd looked online and there were a few good options for my equipment. There were 3 main categories: the controller, the goggles, and of course the drone itself. For the goggles, there are 2 options, either analog or digital. Now the videos that I watched for analog, well, I wasn't very happy with them. From my perspective, it seems very difficult to see anything. So since I'm new to the hobby and I'm a beginner, I thought that if I take the digital version, it would be a lot easier for me to progress over time. Then we have the controller. Again, there are 2 main types. There's either TBS or ERLS. Now, TBS is more expensive, but they also have a very good and reliable long-range system, and ERLS just works, but they're also a lot cheaper than TBS and are actually in stock, unlike TBS. So there I went with ERLS, and so far I find this system really reliable and had no problems with it. So I decided on the Radiomaster Pocket, which I really like. It's nice and small, compact, you can take it with you anywhere, and it functions pretty well. Now, I did have some long range issues where my RF signal became critical with me flying quite far away, but I think this issue was not on the controller but the drone that I was using, since the antenna is really small and doesn't have as much range as other drones. Now, finally the drone. So I went the Cinewhoop route because I found it to be a lot safer, especially when I'm flying in parks like the one I have near me, where I'd be flying around people, and I also found that if I were to fly into some leaves or a tree itself, it would just bounce right off and there wouldn't be no actual damage to the props, which I preferred over having to replace propellers over and over again. The drone I chose was the Happy Model Mobila 8. I had been looking for a small drone that was quite cheap and still really powerful, so I'd been looking online and had a large variety between the Pavo Pico, the GepRC Dark Star, and the Beta FPV Pavo 20. There were lots of options and I really like this drone as it handles pretty well. Turns out it's one of the best ones. I'd watched some reviews and they were all quite similar, but I think this one is the one to go with. Although in windy conditions there can be quite a bit of jello. Normally there is none, but realistically no one's really gonna fly this drone in those windy conditions as its tiny motors aren't capable of sustaining a very strong flight during these winds, which is also affecting the camera quality. So let's put this equipment to the test and see how it goes. Real life was like a whole different level. Now, you're probably wondering, was I able to keep the drone in the air? Yes. But it wasn't too long before I crashed. It took me a while to get used to how the quad felt and interacted to my stick movements. But I was able to manage it in a fair time. So you're probably thinking, well, is it safe? Should I fly? Will it be good for me? I would say, yeah, why not? Don't blame me if you crash, but your flying should be decent enough to be able to keep the quad in the air and not hit into things. If you're feeling like the drone is getting away from you or is out of control, my best options were to actually just disarm the drone, because it would take less damage from just falling out of the sky than getting stuck in a tree or in some bushes or water. So, depending on where you fly, try and make sure you always have control over your drone. Now, there's definitely one thing I can say. You won't be as good as the pros. Now, a fun fact, I was one of those people that thought that it would be really easy for me, but it turns out this hobby takes time to master, as the skill required is very high and the precision, the speed, and the calculations that are done over the years of practice that all the pros have is very high. So in order to be as good as them, all you gotta do is fly FPV. Daily, that is. Another thing is that you will definitely eventually crash, as naturally you try seek the tightest, fastest, most difficult challenge every time you fly your FPV drone. And if that's a gap or just flying really far with your FPV drone for some cinematic shots, eventually you will make a mistake and your drone will crash, falling out of the sky and breaking into pieces. Now, it doesn't matter how much FPV you've flown, as everybody makes mistakes, and the good thing is that you will learn from them and hopefully you won't do them again. Lastly, safety is also very important due to FPV pilots having to do with lots of dangerous stuff, including LiPo batteries. LiPo batteries can overcharge and light your house on fire. That can be very bad. So you have to do enough research into what you are buying and how to store your items, as well as general safety when flying, like your regulations in specific countries, where you're allowed to fly and where you're not allowed to fly, if you need a license, and so on. As always, thank you for watching my video, and please leave a like. It really helps my channel, as well as make sure to subscribe for future videos. It helps a lot.